What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. So I want to try something new here. I want to take a look at characters as they exist in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and compare them to their comic book counterparts, but only in terms of powers. It's no secret that characters in the MCU are depowered, but my question is it possible for them to reach the comic book levels of power? And in this one, I want to talk about Scarlet Witch. Now, here's the thing. Scarlet Witch in the comics, in the early days of the comics, the early Avengers stories, she's very similar to her Marvel Cinematic Universe counterpart, which is to say she can do a little bit of hex manipulation and that's it. The idea of Scarlet Witch originally was that she could just kind of bend luck in her favor, just kind of slight reality manipulation, but there was really nothing more to it than that. But all this changed over the years. West Coast Avengers, the House of M, post House of M, Avengers Disassembled, which led into House of M. What you have in Marvel Comics is you have a character called Chthon. And Chthon is one of is what we call the Elder Gods. In Marvel Comics, in the early days of Earth, you didn't really have humanity. You basically just had these gods roaming around. And eventually this led to a massive civil war between them. But this was all kind of kicked off by Chthon, who was the main bad guy, so to speak. Eventually, when the Demiurge consumed most of the gods, Chthon and Sidorak and a bunch of other beings just kind of took off to alternate realities, alternate dimensions, and just kind of resided there. But Chthon had always sought to find a way back to Earth and basically conquer the world for himself. Where there were different schemes and stuff that happened over the years, all this kind of coincided with the birth of Wanda. You know, when she and Pietro were born by Magda, when they were born on Wundagore Mountain with the High Evolutionary, all that kind of stuff. Chthon had basically reached out and kind of quote unquote touched her. And what that basically meant was that somewhere along the line, Chthon would use her as a vessel to bring himself back. And over the years, that's happened a time or two. Secret Empire had happened, things like that, where Chthon takes total control of Wanda and possesses her in her entirety. In What If stories, that's happened where Wanda kills everyone. But for the most part, her powers weren't really all that special. She could just kind of do some things here and there. Now, this all goes into Avengers Disassembled, which really feeds into the idea that she had kids. So to wind the clock back, when DC launched West Coast Avengers, the idea was to have a Scarlet Witch and Vision centric team, and it kind of focused on their relationship as well as another Avengers team that kind of existed on the West Coast. This is way back in 1982. And the idea here was that you had Vision and Scarlet Witch, who of course were a couple, they were married, and they had kids. And their kids were William and Thomas Maximoff. And what we ended up finding out in West Coast Avengers number 52 was that they never actually existed. Instead, they were basically kids who were created by the Scarlet Witch when she took the essence of Mephisto, like a portion of Mephisto, and created her children and gave them souls. Mephisto, of course, is kind of the stand-in for Satan in the Marvel Universe, but ultimately this was all kind of reconciled and the kids were removed. Now, the reason for this was because of the fact that Scarlet Witch and Vision getting married was weird enough. The two of them having kids was just a little too weird even for comics. And even with West Coast Avengers dying down, really losing popularity and eventually going away, a lot of those themes were wrapped up. The issue was that if Marvel was going to launch House of M and they were going to start with Avengers Disassembled, they needed a means to kind of kick it all off, to kind of make it pop. And so what happened was the Scarlet Witch, she was in Avengers Mansion. The Wasp had given her a hard time about having kids or something along those lines. And then she had memories of having her sons. And for her, the question was, where are they? And so eventually what ends up happening is the Scarlet Witch goes crazy, believing the Avengers have kidnapped her kids, and then goes on a warpath basically. So she manipulates reality. She makes Tony Stark appear drunk. That totally tanks the value of Stark Industries. Tony Stark cannot bankroll the Avengers anymore, so they disband. And then she launches an attack on Avengers Mansion, which leads to the death of Hawkeye and all these different things. And when the smoke's all said and done, Doctor Strange creates this spell where she ends up seeing all kinds of these horrible memories and everything. And she ends up passing out. And so Magneto takes her to Genosha, which used to be a safe refuge for mutants until Cassandra Nova destroyed it, killed 16 million mutants. And then Scarlet Witch just hangs out there with Magneto and Charles Xavier under the hope that her mind can basically be fixed in her fractured state. Now this goes into the events of House of M. And that's when you end up finding out that there was no way to fix her, quote unquote. And so Charles Xavier calls together the X-Men, the Avengers, and basically says we have to kill Scarlet Witch. And so of course Quicksilver steps in and Quicksilver says, no, he runs to Scarlet Witch and says, hey, look, you can fix everything. You can make reality perfect. And so using Scarlet Witch, she basically, or I guess with Scarlet Witch kind of being manipulated, being in a fractured mental state, she ends up kidnapping Charles Xavier, uses her powers, scans his mind, and then learns the subconscious desires of everybody on Earth, and then recreates reality into the House of M universe. So Carol Danvers, who always wanted to be seen as a great superhero, the most popular hero in the world, becomes that. Peter Parker basically has his life, the dream life he always wanted. Steve Rogers never became became Captain America. I mean, he was, but like he ended up just going on and like growing old. And like that was it. He was never frozen in ice for however many years he was frozen there. Just little things like that, small little tidbits here and there. But nonetheless, like Wolverine wakes up, and of course I've got a video on House of M you guys are welcome to check out. But Wolverine wakes up, all his memories are restored. He realizes reality isn't supposed to be that way. He contacts a girl named Layla Miller, who also knows the same thing. She's told other superheroes about it. And by going through and quote unquote waking them up, various heroes like Emma Frost and Cyclops and so on and so forth become aware of how things are supposed to be. And they all believe that Scarlet Witch was the one that was behind all this. Well, you end up learning, of course, that Quicksilver was the one who did this, who got her to do it. And then Magneto freaks out, kills Quicksilver, and then Scarlet Witch loses her mind, resurrects Quicksilver from the dead, and then sets everything back to rights, but says no more mutants in the process. And that, of course, leads to 98% of the mutant population losing their powers. Now, at the outset, that was it. That seemed like that's all there was. 98% of the population loses their powers in the main Marvel universe, and that's all there is to it. The Scarlet Witch was vastly more powerful than that. And in fact, it actually feeds into Old Man Logan. So what ends up happening is in the aftermath of House of M, you end up having Beast, I think it is, who's investigating what's going on and hypothesizes that the actions of the Scarlet Witch did not affect only their reality, it affected the whole multiverse. And so like 98% of the mutant population across the multiverse lost their powers. And this feeds into Old Man Logan, because if you go and you read the Old Man Logan stories, we know from that universe that Wolverine was basically tricked into killing all the X-Men. And then after that, like no more mutants are born anymore. There's a point where Emma Frost kind of makes this offhanded remark. She's like, mutants were just a blip on the radar. We thought that we were like the next stage of human evolution, but that's not the case. And then you look at the actions of Scarlet Witch, and it seems like she's the one that affected it, especially when you bring in the hypothesis of Beast, that she affected the whole multiverse. So, it's entirely possible the Scarlet Witch stripped 98% of the mutant population of their powers across the entire multiverse. And if that's true, that's an insane level of power. Now, when it comes to the nature of the Scarlet Witch, there's a big difference here. Scarlet Witch in the Marvel Cinematic Universe just kind of uses some magic and some things happen, and she makes some weird hand gestures and looks funny. But there's not a whole lot that she does there. She also has the power to lose her accent, but there's not a whole lot that she does there. For the most part, she's not that powerful. She's really more like Jean Grey and from Marvel Comics back in the early days, where her powers are basically like telekinesis. And that's really it, and you see the physical manifestation of telekinesis, and that's about it. There's not much doing there. But the question becomes, does the aspect of Chthon tap into the Scarlet Witch? Because if she harnesses that power like she did during House of M and all that kind of stuff, then that means she's going to be on like a whole nother level. Like she's going to be insanely powerful, far more powerful than someone like Doctor Strange. But by and large, the powers just don't really compare there. I mean, you're talking about a character in the comics who was like multiversal level powerful, who for a brief moment in time was able to pull that off. Now, this kind of goes into the nature of Scarlet Witch's powers in Marvel Comics. In Marvel Comics, there are two types of people who can affect reality. And a lot of individuals get these confused, and it's very easy to do because if you're not familiar with comics, you can't really notice the subtle nuances. But there's what's called reality warpers or reality manipulators, and then matter manipulators. And they're two distinctly different things, but it's easy to confuse them. So take someone like Mad Jim Jaspers, right? He's like really, really powerful, but he has to have a reality to manipulate, right? Like if the universe is clay, he has to be able to have that clay to do anything with it. If there's no clay there, he can't do anything. He's just a guy who exists, and that's it. We know that from those stories when he was teleported to a massive void of what used to be a universe, and it's just an empty blank space, and there's nothing he can do. He's just a guy who's there. But then you look at someone like Franklin Richards. Franklin Richards can just create reality, right? Like he can create something out of nothing. He can go into a huge empty space that is devoid of a universe and then create one. The kid's got all kinds of crazy powers. Scarlet Witch, she's a matter manipulator. She's not a reality warper. The Scarlet Witch cannot create something out of nothing. She can't create a universe. She doesn't have that kind of power. The Scarlet Witch is capable of like altering the existing form of reality, and it's still pretty powerful. I mean, changing people's memories, different things like that. But she's capable of like altering matter. Now, to give you perspective on what that means, it's just rearranging the atomic structure of things. And so she could turn a hat into a teacup. She can just rearrange the atomic structure of that hat and turn it into something else. That's the kind of power she possesses, but it's not something she possesses consistently. It was for an era in time, for a few years of Marvel Comics, and then that's it. Her power just kind of went back to its previous states, and she's been that way ever since. That power is not something she has in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But again, the MCU's kind of stayed away from the notion of vast reality warping powers. We'll probably see that somewhere along the line, and there's ways to pull that off. I mean, we know that she and Vision are a couple. We know that she and Vision are together. You could easily have her like come back after the events of Avengers 4, and then like Vision doesn't return, or Vision returns and like he's basically like he was when he lost his essence in the comics, and he was just like a white android, and he lost his personality and everything, lost the mental patterns of Wonder Man. If you don't know what that means, scenes, it's not a great big huge deal. But the fact remains, like, there could be something that could set in motion the events that lead her to becoming how powerful she was during like House of M and you know, post House of M. But as it stands right now, the powers are night and day. She's much weaker in the movies than she is in the comics. And in fact, again, her character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is more similar to Jean Grey in like 1960s, 1970s Marvel comics than she is to like actual Scarlet Witch in Marvel comics. So it's almost like a total change up. Now, once the X-Men are unveiled, that'll probably change and like her powers will adjust. But at the moment, again, there's no real comparison there. But you know, for the most part, it's interesting to me. You know, it's kind of intriguing. But let me know what you guys think about this idea down in the comments section. Let me know what you guys think about this whole thing. I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing an idea out there. I have no idea if people will be receptive to it or not. Just trying something new. And yeah, if you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.